On today's Gangster Profile, Winter Hill Gang's feared hitman, Johnny Martorano. Johnny Martorano, Winter Hill's white knight who rode around the gritty streets of 1960s and 70s Boston on his trusty white steed, Cadillac, righting wrongs, saving damsels in distress, and vanquishing villains at every turn. Racking up a whopping 18 murders by 1978 and 20 total, which are basically top shelf serial killer numbers. But that's not what the Honorable Martorano was. And he also doesn't like being referred to as a hitman, which is kind of confusing seeing as the name of his book he wrote with Howie Carr is called Hitman. John Martorano was born in Somerville in 1940 to Angelo Martorano of Sicilian descent who owned and operated Luigi's, a popular after-hours club in Boston's Combat Zone. Johnny's mother was Elizabeth Bess Hunt of Irish descent and was a full-time homemaker. Johnny also had a younger brother named Jimmy, who was only 11 months younger than him. Jimmy would also follow Johnny into a life of crime. At the age of 8, the Martoranos moved to East Milton, a nice suburb of Boston. The Martoranos would have been considered upper middle class. Johnny, by all accounts, had a nice all-American childhood. His family were devout Catholics, and Johnny was an altar boy. He was also a standout athlete, even going to the prestigious Mount St. Charles Academy in Rhode Island to play football. There he befriended future 60 Minutes anchor Ed Bradley, who Johnny called Big Ed. Sports was Johnny's first love. He never really cared for school that much. But as he got older, he became more and more attracted to his father's club and the type of people that hung out there. Martorano, in fact, turned down 7 scholarships to play football at universities in order to hang around the combat zone. John Martorano's father, Angelo, was never a made man in the Mafia, but he was a close associate of many made men, and Luigi's was a favorite hangout for many of Boston's underworld figures. In the 1960s, Boston's combat zone was in full swing, and Johnny found the gangsters, hookers, and drug dealers there much more exciting than university life. Martorano was half Irish, so he wouldn't have been able to become a full-fledged member of the Italian Mafia, but he also didn't like how exclusive they were. Johnny liked to socialize and associate with all types of underworld figures. Also, there was an instance of where a made man had mistreated Johnny's father, Angelo, in front of a younger Johnny, even giving him a backhand, and Johnny would never forget this slight. As soon as he started to drift deeper into the darker corners of the underworld, he started a friendship with the Flemmi brothers, Jimmy the Bear and Steve the Rifleman, a couple of bad kids from Roxbury. The Flemmis were under the tutelage of a treacherous gangster, Edward Wimpy Bennett. Now, John's first murder was listed as Robert Bobby Palladino in 1966. Palladino was an associate of the North End and a lifelong criminal that had been known to Martorano since the early 1960s. See, right from the beginning with his first murder, the bullshit starts. Martorano states that he killed Palladino because he was going to implicate John's brother Jimmy in being an accessory after the fact for the murder of Margaret Sylvester, who was a waitress at Luigi's. Margaret, who was intoxicated and having a verbal argument with Jimmy, was later found by Boston police in the third-floor room above Luigi's wrapped in a bloody carpet. Jimmy was the manager the night that she was killed and was replacing the ruined carpet, so he clearly knew a crime had been committed. Johnny heard that Robert Bobby Palladino was talking and implicating his brother and Vincent Jimmy the Bear Flemmi, who Johnny claimed killed Sylvester. Along with an associate, Martorano tracked Palladino down and got into the back seat of his car and put a bullet in the back of Palladino's head and dumped his body underneath the 93 intersection on-ramp outside of North Station in Boston. The reason that I'm going into such detail about this is because right off the bat, Martorano is completely lying and spinning the story to his benefit. He is most likely the person that killed Margaret Sylvester. His brother wasn't known for violence. Johnny, who doesn't have a real alibi for that night, was most likely at Luigi's, and when Sylvester, who was drunk and belligerent, wouldn't go home, the altercation escalated, and Martorano most likely killed her with a knife that he admits to carrying regularly. With Luigi's only exit being on a busy street, they wrapped her up in a carpet and brought her upstairs until they could figure out a plan to get her body out of the building. Johnny then went and killed Palladino and bartender John Jackson, who Martorano would have known well from being at Luigi's all the time. Martorano killed these men most likely to protect himself, not anyone else. But this recounting of the events obviously goes against Martorano's narrative that he only killed people to protect those he cared about and he never killed women. Johnny's father opened a second club called Basin Street South on the border of the South End and Roxbury, which in the 60s was the heart of Boston's black population. This led to one of Martorano's more dubious nicknames, the Basin Street Butcher. While spending a lot of his time in Roxbury, he became well acquainted with a lot of black gangsters as well as drug dealers and prostitutes. In the late 60s and early 70s, heroin and cocaine were becoming more and more prevalent. One day while drinking at the bar on Basin Street, a woman named Roberta Campbell came in and told a very sad story about how her husband Alvin, his brother Arnold, and the close associate Dee Chandler were rotting in a jail cell, awaiting a murder trial. And this dirtbag Ronald Hicks, who Martorano described as a pimp and dope dealer, was going to testify against them and land them in prison for the rest of their lives. Johnny claimed he didn't know the men, but he could empathize with this woman and thought of himself being in their situation. So setting out to right the wrongs being done upon the Campbell brothers, he scoured the South End looking for Ronald Hicks. He found him on the Fenway and flagged him down. Hicks stopped, and as he was cutting a couple lines of coke for him and Martorano, he was shot in the back of the head. Another just killing for Martorano and another bullshit story. To think for a minute that John Martorano hung out in Roxbury and didn't know the Campbell brothers or Dee Chandler is ridiculous. They were in jail for a notorious crime where they were trying to extort federal money from a non-profit on Blue Hill Ave, and 3 people ended up being murdered. They were also the kingpins of Roxbury's blossoming drug trade. They were trying to bring all independent drug dealers under their umbrella and sell their dope. Ronald Hicks was one of the last holdouts and already had a violent exchange with enforcer Dee Chandler. Johnny was rumored to be a drug pusher and user and would have benefited directly from the Campbells being free and in charge of the drug rackets. Again, another absolutely bogus claim by Martorano. He was nicknamed Bawana Johnny, which I'm sure is some racist moniker that I'm too young to understand, and he was said to be very friendly with the black community. But Martorano has probably killed more black people than any other white gangster in the city of Boston's history, with a body count of 5 that we know about for sure. Now, I don't want to go into graphic detail of every murder that Martorano committed. 20 murders is a lot of murders, and I really don't want to spend a half an hour depicting the macabre details of these crimes. It's really depressing. Plus, there's also the fact that Martorano's retelling of almost all the murders he committed are completely askew. He's never a cold-blooded, remorseless murderer who killed for almost no reason. There's always some just cause for why he killed someone. Oh, and he doesn't like to being referred to as a serial killer. 20 murders? Don't they refer to people with half of those as a serial killer? And he also doesn't like being referred to as a hitman, which may seem a little confusing, seeing as the title of his book he made with Howie Carr is called Hitman.
Hitman is, that sounds to me like somebody's getting paid, a paid contract. I mean, you could never pay me to kill anybody.
A lot of people would say you're a serial killer.
I might be a vigilante, but not a serial killer. Serial killers, you have to stop them, they'll never stop. And they enjoy it. I never enjoyed it. I don't enjoy risking my life, but if the cause was right, I would.
So you felt like you were doing the right thing?
I always felt like I was doing the right thing.
The fact that the government made such a sweetheart deal with him, although not shocking, is enough to turn your stomach. For admitting to his role in 20 murders, he was sentenced to a little more than 12 years, which is the equivalent to about 7 months per body. The only thing that can probably piss the families of his victims off more than the leniency of the sentence is listening to Martorano denigrate their loved ones and absolve himself by saying he only killed bad people who deserved it. The federal government also put $6,000 into his canteen account so he could get his fill of ramen every night, and upon his release they gave him $20,000 walk-around money. The U.S. attorney that signed off on the deal said the only thing worse than making this deal was not making this deal. Can lawyers talk some shit, or can they talk some shit? Other mobsters like Cadillac Frank Salami said Martorano did so because he wanted to implicate people for crimes before they could implicate him. Now, of course, Martorano had his own spin on this and even tried to manipulate himself and others into believing that he's not a rat.
Back where he gave everybody else.
You became an informer?
No, I became a government witness, not an informant or a rat. I became a government witness.
What's the difference?
One's got the courage to stand on the stand, the other one's doing it behind your back and dropping dimes. And how can I be ratting on a guy who's the rat for 30 years? I'm trying to stop him from ratting anymore.
On top of the money given to him by the federal government, he received $70,000 for the Hitman book written by Howie Carr. While although an entertaining read, it's mostly complete bullshit. He was also paid $250,000 for the movie rights to his life, and he is promised another $250,000 if the movie ever is made. It's not going to get made. When asked at court if he was going to give any of that money to the victims' families, he said, "I got my own family to feed." From 2 marriages, Martorano has 5 children, 4 of which are upstanding members of society. John Martorano will go down as another chapter in Boston's most sordid period ever, a time that the city and law enforcement would like the public to forget as soon as possible. If you like this video, hit the like button. Please keep leaving comments, and that reminds me, shout out to the person that asked for this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and as for Johnny Martorano, hopefully he'll have better luck trying to bullshit his maker than he has all of us. Have a great day, and take good care of yourselves.
I can't change it.
You still a Catholic?
Sure.
I mean, you burn in hell for killing one person.
I don't believe that.
You don't believe that?
No. At one point, maybe a couple of years ago, I sent for a priest and gave him a confession. It was maybe 30 years since my last confession, but I went through the whole scenario with him and went through my whole life with him and confessed. And at the end of it, he says, "Well, what do you think I should give you for penance?" I says, "Father, you can justifiably crucify me." He laughed and says, "No, 10 Hail Marys, 10 Our Fathers, and don't do it again." So I'll listen to him.